Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News. This one, a special edition focusing on the tragic loss of the Air India Boeing 787 that's claimed almost 300 people. I'm Jeffrey Thomas and delighted to say joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. Good evening, Richard.
And good evening, Jeffrey.
Yes, and for those who don't know, I'm in Paris attending the Paris Air Show. We've had an extraordinary response to the two videos we've put up about the loss of the Air India 787. We've had 190,000 views, 6,300 likes, and over 1,600 comments. In many cases, viewers liked other viewers' comments with another 4,000 likes and 750 replies. There were some good debates and discussions going on. There were also over 1,000 unique commentators, some quite vocal and some quite repetitive. We counted 360 comments and replies from one individual who cut and pasted the same message all over the place. In general, 30% of the statements were repeated. There were 74,594 words of content in the comments and replies. So clearly a very, very robust debate. However, I should mention that we will not tolerate slurs between nationalities. Those comments will be deleted, so please don't put them up. Please treat everybody with respect, and please consider that for many people, English is their second tongue, and we need to show tolerance and respect. So please, if you don't want to do that, then please don't comment because it'll be deleted. So today we're going to hear what you have to say on the Air India tragedy. First of all, correction, Richard, before we start, you want to correct something you said yesterday evening about the RAT deployment.
Yeah, my apologies to all. I made a mistake yesterday evening, which was kindly pointed out by a commentator. At John Keelan says, I am a 787 pilot. And just a correction concerning the APU and RAT. The APU is not a source of bleed air. It only supplies electrical power to the aircraft. No bleed air is used in the engine start sequence on a 787. In my experience, it takes about 90 seconds for the APU to start on the ground and would likely be a little faster when airborne at low altitudes. The APU was probably not up and running due to the short nature of the flight. If the ram air turbine was deployed, it indicates that there was an extremely exigent situation occurring with a very few items then being powered. The landing gear cannot be retracted using the RAT. Also, in addition to providing limited hydraulic power to the flight controls, the RAT does provide limited standby electrical power for cockpit displays, limited navigation capabilities, and fire detection. So many thanks, John, for pointing that out. I had consulted some Boeing experts on the Boeing 787-8, but I have learnt in the past that I should still check the Flight Crew Operating Manual, the FCOM, the Flight Crew Training Manual, FCTM, and the Aircraft Maintenance Manual, AMM, which I failed to do yesterday. I have all the manuals for the Boeing 777, 200ER for the Malaysian 370 analysis, but not for the 787. It is interesting to note that the RAT on the Boeing 767 was hydraulic only. On the Boeing 777 was hydraulic and electrical, And now on the 787 is only electrical. So things change. And the APU on the 767 and 777 did supply bleed air, but no longer on the 787, as John points out. The 787 has an all electrical architecture. There are still some hydraulic systems and actuators. Some flight controls are hydraulic, but some are also electro-hydrostatic and some purely electrical. The landing gear extension, as John points out, can only be extended and retracted using hydraulics, and the brakes are hydraulic. They have an electrical backup. The thrust reversers, the operation of those is hydraulic.
Yes, it gets quite complicated between aircraft models within the same family or same manufacturer.
Same manufacturer, the same family, and then each variant, and then each airline can have custom differences. So you have to be very careful.
So, Richard, with your analysis of all the comments, so what did the viewers say about Air India AIC 171?
Well, they had a huge amount to say, but there were three key topics of discussion. Number one, engines, 773 comments. Number two is fuel, 406 comments. And number three, the RAT, there were 331 comments.
So let's start with the engines. What was the consensus from the viewers on the engines, Richard?
Yeah, well, everyone seems to agree that there was engine or engines, plural, failure. Then talk about the loss of power, loss of thrust, the loss of airspeed, the loss of lift. And they also talk about the fact that if the engines both fail, then the electrical generators in the engines will no longer supply power. They talk about the battery power, which is supplied instantly. And they talk about the RAT being deployed within 3 to 5 seconds and the supply of emergency electrical power for controls, instruments, and emergency lighting. And there's lots of mentions of flickering lights. The APU is started, but will take more than 45 seconds to come online. And this, many viewers point out, would have been too late.
Okay, so that's the engines. So what about the fuel? What was the consensus on the fuel situation?
Well, the big concern on the fuel was fuel contamination. Some viewers pointed out that there was no other aircraft affected by fuel contamination. Some viewers countered that a particular fuel truck could have been contaminated rather than all of the Jet A fuel supply at the airport. And other viewers point out fuel contamination usually leaves white smoke, grey smoke, or black smoke. And they say in the video footage, no smoke was seen. So there's a mystery on that one. And I was ridiculed and apparently have lost all credibility with some people for saying the wrong type of fuel could have been used. Now, I will counter that if I may. Piston engine planes, typically training aircraft and small charter aircraft, do operate from Ahmedabad Airport, and it has a general aviation terminal. So avgas 100 octane low lead fuel is available at the airport for these aircraft. And if you put avgas 100LL in the tanks of a Boeing 787-8 with the GE NX-1B 67 engines, it would be catastrophic. Turbine blades and combustion chambers could overheat or even melt. It could ignite prematurely and create a fireball during startup. And if the aircraft still somehow managed to take off, engines would likely flame out in flight very quickly.
So, what did the viewers say about the rat?
Well, 271 viewers are convinced that the rat was deployed, which in turn signals a dual engine failure. Some viewers say the rat can be automatically deployed, but there is a manual override switch in the cockpit. Some viewers say the rat can only be deployed automatically and not manually. One viewer, in fact, edited his comments stating, on the 787, the rat cannot be deployed manually. It only can be deployed auto, and apologized profusely to the other viewers for originally stating manual deployment was possible.
So, which is it, Richard? Auto or manual or both?
Well, that's a good question. My understanding is that there is an override switch in the cockpit in the event that the rat fails to deploy automatically. But perhaps our pilot friend John can chime in with a comment on this discussion as well.
Yeah. What other comments or points were raised by the viewers, Richard?
Well, one of the other hot topics, 223 viewers discussed speculation. Some like speculation, others do not like speculation. And you and I have been criticized for not being willing to speculate, and then by others criticized for doing nothing but speculating. So you can't win. One viewer points out, I'm free to speculate, and so are you. Well, in my view, yes, dear viewers, you are free to speculate as you wish. But if we start speculating in public, then conclusions can be reached without evidence, and we will be accused of misinformation. Now, speculation can be useful, creative thinking, brainstorming, developing a scientific hypothesis. There are some who are even speculating in the financial markets at the moment on the Boeing shares going up or down. But you can have speculation, but you need to define the assumptions you're making. And you give the rationale why those assumptions are valid. Drawing conclusions on pilot error, aircraft design faults, poor maintenance, sabotage, hijacking is, in my view, premature. And all those conclusions have been drawn by different viewers already in various comments. So, to give you an example, one viewer says he's speculating and states a very loud bang after takeoff is a very ominous sign. Well, I think we would all agree with that statement. And then the viewers differ, however, on whether the noise came from the engines, the rat being deployed, or indeed from the impact. So viewers also differ on exactly when this loud noise occurred. Was it on the runway during acceleration? Was it during the climb out? Was it the moment when the rat was deployed? Or was it, in fact, when the tail of the plane hit the refectory roof on crashing? And another example is the Mayday call. Raised by 58 viewers. 7 viewers actually quote the pilot's Mayday call verbatim with quotation marks, but there were 4 different versions, so they can't all be right. Many viewers cited YouTube videos on the Mayday call. There are actually 8 different YouTube videos, all claiming to have heard an audio clip of the actual cockpit voice recording. But they are all dramatized narration, captioning, or animation. None have an audio clip of the actual cockpit voice recording. So, fine to speculate, but let's try and stick within the realm of the facts, please.
Yes, it's rather interesting that when we're talking about speculation and being accused of either not speculating or speculating too much, the viewers themselves are quoting about 4 or 5 different versions of what's supposed to be the fact. So it underscores what we're talking about, doesn't it?
It does. And of course, everyone has an opinion and everyone is entitled to their opinion. But I'm just pointing out there are a large number of conflicting opinions out there. And actually, establishing facts is what the investigation will be taking months and years over. And somehow we have a difficulty in waiting for the outcome of an official investigation. And as we've pointed out in many episodes, even then, the investigators disagree amongst themselves, and there's can be an unending debate on certain subjects.
Yes, certainly right, Richard, and that's of concern. We live in a very instant world these days, and everybody wants to know yesterday what happened. And it's the science of aircraft investigation can take years, and I know of several tragic accidents that took 4 and 5 years to really sort out precisely what happened. This one, I think, is going to be complex because the facts, as we know them, as we said yesterday, don't link up. They don't make sense. You know, to have a dual engine failure on a 787, the mathematics of that don't even compute. The chances are, and in fact, I'll mention an Airbus sales pitch back in the 1990s when they were selling the A330 twin engine aircraft, wide body, and they estimated that you'd have to fly non-stop for 8,000 years before you had a dual engine failure because engines are so reliable. And so it's rather an interesting stat. They said you'd have to fly back to when the Sahara Desert was a jungle. So that's how far you have to go back in time to suffer a dual engine failure on a twin engine aircraft.
Yeah.
So
And when we talk about a dual engine failure on takeoff of a Boeing 787 8, it needs to be said again, this has never happened.
no, it hasn't. It hasn't. And the only time you've had a dual engine failure was actually on an Airbus A330. And the reason for that was a fuel leak. They had some maintenance done and the connections were not put back properly and there was chafing of the fuel lines. And it was an Air Transat aircraft traveling from Canada to Europe. And it did the most spectacular landing in the Azores, and everybody was saved. But they had no engine power, and they glided down. It's an amazing story, which I know is part of Air Crash Investigation or the Mayday series. But that's the only time there has been a dual engine failure, and it wasn't anything to do with the engines. It was a fuel line problem. So had some fascinating questions, and we're still sifting through them. And we'll be back tomorrow with more analysis of the tragedy, and we're searching for more information. And as soon as we get it, we'll deliver it to the viewers. But we'll also look at more of their questions and more of their thoughts on this, and come back tomorrow. Would you think that's a
Indeed.
good plan?
Yep. And there are more questions coming in all the time. And So we will pick out the best ones tomorrow, go through a dozen or so of those questions from the viewers.
Terrific. So viewers, thank you very much indeed for watching. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep the comments coming. Please keep the questions coming. We do appreciate them very much indeed. But also, please show some restraint, show some respect, and keep it above board. And thank you again, Richard.
You're welcome.